afternoon and welcome everyone to our next installment in our Israel Lunch and Learn program. We at Congregation Emanu, we have long been committed to tackling hunger in Houston from our involvement in projects such as Kids Meals, Search Homeless Services, and many, many others. And so as part of our ongoing series of programs on Israel, we are excited to merge those two streams, our involvement in hunger and our involvement in Israel, by welcoming the founder of Leket Israel, Mr. Joseph Gitler. Joseph originally founded Table to Table, Israel's food rescue network, to respond to the paradox of growing hungry and poverty in Israel in conjunction with the ongoing struggle with food waste. Now known as Leket Israel, Joseph's organization has become the country's largest food bank and food rescue network, distributing food in partnership with 200 nonprofit organizations to more than 175,000 people in need each week. Founded in 2003, just 3 years after he made Aliyah, Joseph's Leket Israel helps impoverished people throughout the country, regardless of their age, gender, ethnic background, or religion. They run several projects, including Sandwiches for Kids, which was launched in 2006. There are 850,000 children suffering from hunger in Israel, and many of them go to school without sufficient meals. In order to help feed these children, volunteers make and distribute 7,500 to 8,000 sandwiches every morning in 40 cities, much like the work that we do with Search and with Kids Meals. We are excited to learn with Joseph today about a subject that both he and our congregation have a deeply vested interest in. And as we were noting earlier, many of our teens are with us here today who will be traveling this summer on the Shirley Barish Memorial Israel Experience, and those teens will have the opportunity this summer to volunteer with Leket. So we are delighted to welcome Joseph here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stephanie, and hope everyone can hear me. Yeah, someone stay on camera. If I'm looking at just people's, someone, thank you. It's very hard when you're just talking to yourself. I need to see someone smiling, so thank you, whoever's on camera. So before we get started, I think Shira, who's with me, and first of all, let me just say thank you for the warm introduction, and thank you for all the wonderful work that the temple does in your community in Israel. We look forward to once again greeting your teens here in Israel. We're going to put them to work. So I don't see the teens, but I hope they're ready to work. We look forward to greeting you all when you come. I've actually been to Houston a couple of times for Leket, and my colleague Lauren, who could not be on today, is actually building a Houston committee in support of Leket. And so keep your eyes and ears out for that. Hello to the teens. I see a lot of, oh, there you are. Thanks for waving, guys and gals. Much appreciated. I should actually add that before we show the video, on our board, we have a former Houstonian Rabbi Brenner Glickman, who was in the Houston community for many years and now is in Sarasota, Florida. So lots of connections to Houston and lots of supporters, beautiful community, and look forward to coming once again. So before we start, let's have a short video, a couple of minutes from Shira, get us in the mood, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about Leket, and I hope, most important, that we'll have lots of questions. Shira, please. Okay. Can everyone hear me? Jason, we're okay? Thumbs up? All right, great. By the way, if you get lucky, especially the teens, maybe my dog will make an appearance also. We thought we were getting a post-COVID dog, but then I found out that COVID still isn't over. So it's the middle COVID dog, and my children have not surprised me, meaning what they promised, they haven't done. They have not taken care of the dog. It's all on me. But thankfully, Leket has a great team to make sure that all our work happens. So now I can take care of our dog. Okay, let me start off by introducing myself a little bit, and then we'll talk about a little bit about the why Leket exists. And then I think most important, we're going to try to take as many questions as possible. So I'll reintroduce myself. My name is Joseph Gitler. I'm 47 years old. As you can probably hear, I grew up in New York City and really lived in the New York area until my wife, Lila, and I, and our daughter, Meital, decided 21 and a half years ago that we would make Aliyah, that we would move to Israel. We made that decision because that's how we were brought up. That it was a great thing to do. Of course, when we told our respective parents that we were doing that, they said to us that no one actually listens to that. We teach you to move to Israel, but no one actually listens. But here we are, 22 years later, very happily married in Israel. We currently have 5 children. I shouldn't say currently. We have 5 children. That's it. And that's why we have the dog. And a son-in-law. My oldest daughter, Meital, got married at the height of Corona. So I got off very easy. Her wedding was 40 people. And I found out afterwards, even that was slightly illegal. So who would have thought 40 people wouldn't be allowed? And we live in a town called Ra'anana, which is about 20 minutes northeast of Tel Aviv. And I don't know how many of you on this Zoom, especially the teens, have been in Israel before, but it's not someplace you're going to be visiting. It's not a particularly interesting place. It's just a suburb of Tel Aviv, nice place to live, lots of people who speak English, lots of people who sound like me, lots of people, well, I want to say who look like me, but it's a pretty homogenous, kind of boring place to live. Very different than where I grew up in New York City, where it was just the opposite of that. In America, I had a very brief legal career. And then when I came to Israel, of course, Israel is known by some as the startup nation for all the great technology coming out of Israel. So I figured, let me get into that as well. And so after we moved here, I joined a software business and I worked there for the first 3 years after we made Aliyah. So that brings us to the beginning of 2003. And the teens are for sure too young to remember, but I can't see everyone else on this call, but I'm just going to assume that everyone else on the call was around in 2003 and, wasn't 2 or 3 years old then. 2003 was a very difficult time in the state of Israel. We had what was called the Second Intifada, which was a very violent period of attacks in Israel, really horrific bus bombings and hotel bombings. And of course, not surprisingly, that had a major impact on the Israeli economy. It kept tourists from coming to Israel, also not surprisingly. And that was one thing that was going on. A second thing that was going on was, although September 11th, of course, the Twin Towers happened in New York, the United States historically has been the biggest investor in Israeli high tech. And so, of course, after September 11th, the world changed, America changed, and that impacted Israel's economy very, very negatively. So I'm living my life. I'm very fortunate. I'm living in this nice upper middle class town, Ra'anana, and I'm going to weddings and I'm going to bar and bat mitzvahs and going to hotels and going out to eat. And everywhere we go, and this may sound familiar to all of you, every time we're out, everyone always comments, Israel, I'll say it in Hebrew and then I'll say it in English, Eretz Zavat Chalav Udvash, Israel, the land of milk and honey. the bounty, the portion size, the leftovers, everyone talked about it. It didn't matter what we were at, especially for those of you who've been to Israel, you know, the famous Israeli hotel breakfast, which is just so over the top, or if you've been to an event in Israel, and everyone said the same thing. And, you know, the flip side always was, well, what's happening to all this food? And we all knew the answer. And the answer was, most of it is being thrown away. The families are taking a little bit. The staff is eating. Okay, I think the teens on this, it looked like for the teens, I couldn't see them really clearly, but it kind of looked like to me, they're not old enough yet to have, you know, waitered or worked in a catering hall yet. But that's a very popular way to make money over here in Israel for, you know, teens, 16, 17, 18 plus year olds. And it just dawned on me, Israel's struggling economically. There are a lot of people living below the poverty line. People working in tourism don't have jobs. Even people who had worked in high tech, in hospitality, were really struggling. And yet here I am, living very fortunately. And my friends and I and others are all saying the same thing. There's all this waste. What's happening to it? And no one's doing anything about it. So I was very lucky. The company that I was working in also happens to be a company that our family owns. So this is not business or career advice for any of you who have family businesses, okay? Especially when you're the low guy on the totem pole, which I was then at the age of 26, almost 26. But essentially, at the time, March 2003, I went to a cousin and I said, I'm so concerned about this situation. How can we live in Israel, right? The dream of the Jewish people for so long. And there's so many poor people, which is not a surprise. Okay, that's expected. But we're also wasting so much food. How can we allow those two things to coexist? And I said to him, I'm going to take off 3 months and I need to investigate this issue and see what kind of solutions I can offer. That was 19 years ago. And here I am talking to you all today. So as you can imagine, this organization, Leket Israel, has taken on a life of its own, a life far larger than I thought my 3-month sabbatical would be. And essentially what I did at the time, and yes, this is definitely a life's lesson, I did my homework. I didn't just say, okay, there's food, there's hungry people, let's jump into it. I first actually visited dozens of nonprofit organizations, NGOs, soup kitchens, homeless shelters, battered women's shelters, after school club for kids, you name it, in order to ask them what was missing. And of course, they said, we need money, we need volunteers. But when I pressed them and I said, what about food? All of them said to me, oh, we spend so much of our time raising money to buy food. What about if someone were to offer you leftover food? Oh, that would be great. We'd love to have that, especially if it's high quality, safe, nutritious, deliver it to our door at no cost. They had a lot of demands, but that's okay. In Israel, I always say beggars can't be choosers. That's the society we live in, and I'm okay with that. So I took these answers, and I visited at least 75 agencies around the country, Jewish, Arab, Christian, Muslim, Druze, Bedouin, you name it, all types. And I realized, of course, they're doing God's work, these organizations. They're dealing with the battered, the beaten, people who need rehabilitation, people who need a chance to be educated. And what's missing is resources. So resources can be money, resources can be lots of things, but one resource all of them needed was food. And step 2 of my homework is I started to call up catering firms because I knew, just like you know, and it's no different in Houston, we all know that doesn't matter what affair you go to, there's an expectation of great excess. That's the way the modern food culture is built. That's the way our events have to look. If you're the last person at the buffet still has to be very, very full. And so I just started calling up these caterers and saying, I know you have leftover food. Will you give it to me? I won't sell it. I'll give it away to need-based organizations. The response wasn't, what's my risk of legal liability if the food goes bad? Can I be sued if someone gets food poisoning? The answer was almost to a T, not 100%, but I'll say 99%. Where were you yesterday? Can you come tonight? Can you build this operation up and take this food and make sure that it's fed to people who need it? And that essentially is how Leket Israel was born. I started out in my own car. Usually I say my wife's car, actually, because I was smarter than that to use my own car, because I knew in the beginning what was going to happen. I knew there was going to be spills and mishaps and smells in the in the carpeting of the car that were never going to get out, and that I was not wrong at all when it comes to that. So her car quickly became my car quickly became her car, which is fine. And what I saw very quickly was that the food was fabulous, high quality, nutritious, safe, and the caterers, especially the waiters, were absolutely thrilled that this food wasn't going to waste. Okay, you could just see the joy. At the end of the day, it's not the owners and it's not the chefs who are throwing away the food. It's the waiters who are putting it in the garbage at the end of the night. And so they were thrilled to help pack it when I would show up, to bring it to my car to make sure I didn't have too much to carry. And slowly but surely, I would do 3 events a night, 4 events a night, 5 events a night. But eventually, I saw very quickly that how much could one person do on their own? So I started to recruit volunteers, some of whom are still with us to this day. And that allowed us to expand very, very quickly. What started at catered events continued to hotels, corporate cafeterias, army bases, to the point where today, with volunteers and our own paid staff, we're collecting and distributing somewhere around 10,000 meals every single day. So I'd say just on that side of our operation, that's a massive, massive undertaking. And the beauty of it really is that we can go then to an after-school club for kids and say to them, we're going to deliver hot food straight from this army base to your after-school club. It's going to be a hook to bring the kids in. Once the kids are well fed, it's going to be a lot easier to get them to focus and concentrate on doing their work. And if they succeed, then the sky's the limit. That's side A of our operation. And that's growing. And we've actually set a goal. We hope by 2025, sounds far away, but it really isn't, to be at 20,000 meals a day. Okay, it already may be the largest meal rescue program anywhere. And the main reason is, unfortunately, in the United States, even though there are laws that protect food donors, they're called Good Samaritan laws, that protect food donors from legal liability. There's a federal law, pretty much every state, I'm going to assume Texas as well, and many localities have laws protecting food donors from legal liability as long as they weren't reckless, as long as they followed the health code. Even with that, because of the nature of American society when it comes to litigation and lawyers, unfortunately in America, probably enough cooked food goes to waste to feed the entire world and back. So we're always working on that. We're always talking to our partners in the US, and here and there it does happen. There are synagogues, there are churches that make it happen. But overall, unfortunately, what I'm talking about in Israel is done on a small scale in the US, obviously far, far larger than Leket, but the United States population is also 36 times Israel. So we should be seeing more action in that area. The other side of what we do, and this is where our name comes from, and I know someone's going to ask that, so I'm just going to preempt that if that's okay, and that's Leket. So Leket, for those of you who don't know, there are a couple of mitzvot, commandments in the Torah, which talk about the obligation of the farmer to take care of the poor. So the three are called Leket, Shichacha, Upeah. Those are the three mitzvot. And essentially, they're mitzvot which talk about leaving a corner of your field for the poor to be able to come and glean, not collecting certain crops that fall off the back of the wagon. Beautiful, beautiful commandments, very sensible for ancient times when farmers were the business people. But of course, today's, well, we could have a discussion about it, but today's state of Israel is not technically a religious state. And so, of course, no one's going to tell the farmers they have to do anything. And so, once again, modern food culture makes it just happen on its own. And these commandments, Leket Shekupeya, and that's where our name comes from, we're basically the gleaning society. That's what Leket is. And gleaning, for those who don't know what it means, gleaning is basically going, we talk about usually fruits and vegetables. It means going to a field at the end of the harvest, and finding the good crops that have been left there. And so in today's modern world, that's happening for a whole variety of reasons. You may be familiar with the term ugly fruits and vegetables. Okay, Leket gets its hands on lots of those. They're safe, they're nutritious, they're tasty. They're no different than any other fruit or vegetable. They just look funny. And because they look funny, they never make it to market. That's one we have involved in farmers. Another way is, you may know the term bumper crop. Okay, I was brought up thinking the term bumper crop was a good thing, and it is a good thing for customers, for the consumers. For the farmers, bumper crops are usually very, very difficult, because if you're in the cucumber business in Israel, if everything turned out perfectly for you, it probably turned out perfectly for every other cucumber farmer in the country. And of course, when there's too much supply, prices start to drop. That's where Leket comes into the picture again. When prices drop and it doesn't make sense for farmers to gather their crops, that's where Leket comes into the picture. We don't want gifts from farmers. We want situations where they can't make profit to help us. I'll give other examples: order cancellations, price fluctuations, currency issues. So as an example, this is an example I always give. Now it's become even more pronounced, but Israel often exports in the winter months a lot of crops to Russia. When President Putin made trouble the first time in 2014, and the US slapped sanctions on him, the ruble, which is the Russian currency, became very weak, making it overly expensive for Russians to import from Israel, or not enough money for Israeli farmers to export there. They would have lost too much money. As you can imagine, with what's going on now, and of course, this is not a discussion about what's going on in the Ukraine, but there are so many, and you guys are in Houston, so maybe it's party time in Houston, I don't know, with oil prices being where they are. But every time there's a war, there's impacts that no one expects. So what's an impact on Israel? There are multiple impacts. One, for example, we have already about 15,000 Ukrainians who came to Israel unexpectedly. Okay, and there's more, and Russians, by the way, and more expected, likely. That's number one. So that's going to put some stress on the country's finances. When it comes to Leket, we've already, through partners, through the press, estimate that there's about 40,000 tons. Just understand that's about 80, almost 90 million pounds of vegetables, primarily carrots, potatoes, beets, kohlrabi, onions, that were grown specifically for the Russian and Ukrainian markets, that are never going to be sent there, because it's impossible. How are you going to get it there now? Between sanctions and not being able to do money transfers, it's never going to happen. So we are now working to make sure that as much of those crops as we can get our hands on don't go to waste. Farmers are working very hard to find alternate markets. The big problem is it's so much stuff that Israel, while growing, is still a country of only a little over 9 million people, and dropping another 40, 50, 100,000 tons on the market here will destroy the prices, and a lot of farmers will go out of business. So we're doing what we can to help, including something that we never do, which is actually giving small amounts of money as a thank you to farmers who work with us at this time. Okay. I could probably go on, but I think I'd rather see what I missed by opening it up to some questions and seeing what people ask. And if there are no questions, then I'll just go on for a little bit longer. So I don't know who's guiding the questions, Jason or Stephanie, but it'd be great to see if some of the teens have questions. Adults also, welcome, but especially the teens.
We have a question in the room here.
All righty, and tell me your name, please.
My name is Lisa.
Hello, Lisa.
I'm a teacher here, and I personally know people who work with City Harvest in New York, with Second Servings in Houston, and with Imperfect Foods, which is a mail order company that is food rescue and surplus that an individual can order food from, not just produce, but meat, fish, nuts, anything that's overproduced or ugly. And those are just the ones I'm aware of. Have you done any work with any of those organizations in terms of studying what they do, patterning yourself after them? And are there others in the United States that I'm not aware of?
Oh, okay. So let's start with that. Thank you for the question. Don't run away. Don't run away. Stay close. Thank you. So nice to talk to you. So first of all, let's start with the end. There are hundreds, if not thousands of organizations throughout the US, Canada, Europe, all over the world. In fact, and I should have mentioned in the beginning, I sit on the board of the Global Food Bank Network, which helps open up food banks around the world. And one of my colleagues and friends on it is Brian Green, who is the CEO of the Houston Food Bank, which is the biggest food bank in the United States. Okay, so the answer, and City Harvest was actually my first discussions after I did my research were with Second Harvest in Toronto. My wife is from Toronto, and I went there to visit them. And many, many discussions over the years with City Harvest, which is often looked at as kind of the leading light, only because they were one of the first. Everyone's doing a great job. Everyone's a little different. Everyone's a little nuanced. Houston's a massive city, but it's very different than Manhattan, as an example, right? In the way where people work, how they work, the skyscrapers, what kind of food is available, where and when. So everyone's different. That's what I found over the years. The beauty, of course, of the nonprofit world and why I'm so happy to be part of it is because it's a sharing world. Everything's open. We all share with each other. We all learn from each other. Here, I'll give you an example. On Friday, I got a LinkedIn message from Christina. I don't remember her last name. She's the CEO of the Cleveland Food Bank. Also a major food bank. She's in Israel on a Cleveland Jewish Federation mission, landing today. And she got permission, even though they're chock full, she got permission Tuesday morning to come visit Leket. Do we have time to meet her? Okay, so that's the world we live in. I probably, in the business world, if you're in the oil business and your competitor calls, someone in your field calls you and says, come, I want to take a look at your oil fields or whatever, it's not going to happen. It's just and that's really a special part of our world. So we all learn from each other, but what we've all learned over the years is every single jurisdiction is just a little bit different, but there is a lot in common that we can learn from. Most important when it comes to the Global Food Bank Network is exporting this expertise, to the poorer countries of the world. And that's the real focus of that organization. I hope I answered all your questions.
We have another one.
Hi, my name is Judy. I've got a question
Judy.
about prepared foods. I understand, food banks, that comes out of the farmers and everything, but how fast of a turnaround? And what do you do with all the prepared foods? Because that's a problem in Houston. There are some restaurants that have joint organizations, but they're limited, okay? I was just curious about that.
Sure. Great question. Thank you. So first, I should mention that our volunteers and our drivers are trained by our nutritional staff on what's safe to take and not safe to take. Okay. They'll even walk around with thermometers if they have a question, and they'll stick a thermometer in the food to see what temperature it's been kept at. Nothing is coming off the tables. The only thing Leket takes is stuff that may have been on a buffet, or even better, never even left the kitchen. That's the ideal. Our turnover is really fast. That's how we built the organization, meaning a lot of the food collected at night goes directly at night to agencies. Often it's then refrigerated and stored overnight and then eaten the next day, which that's perfectly fine. A lot of the food we collect by day also goes directly to the agencies same day. We're really trying not to store food. I would say it may not be an official rule, but all cooked food collected by Leket is certainly in an agency partner within 24 hours. And I think it's probably almost always within 12 hours, because we understand that this food is risky. Okay. And also I should mention, and maybe this is the most important point, cooked food is only delivered to agencies where the food is eaten in that agency. We don't allow that food to then take another journey. Like, we won't bring cooked food to a Meals on Wheels program where they're then going to take it to people's houses. That's just too risky. So we think we're pretty careful. And I'll say again in Hebrew, I don't know if there are any Hebrew speakers on this call, but I like to say, Al tiftach peh l'satan. Don't open your mouth to Satan, which basically in my case means we've been at it for 19 years. It seems like it's going well, and I'm going to try to keep it that way.
Last part of that question is,
Please.
Texas has become quite involved in the cruise line industry. Have you tapped into the cruise lines at all?
Okay, that's a great question, by the way. The place where I've seen the most amazing work with cruise lines is actually in Italy, which is really big when it comes to cruises. And there, the big, not all of them, but a few of the big companies have really bought into it and are trying. Now, obviously, the problem with, I was on one cruise in my life, so I saw what goes on. It's not normal. Okay, it's like, and I would like to go on another cruise. And my wife says to me, how are you going to handle that? You're going to be like a madman on that cruise ship. It's you won't be able to handle it. She doesn't think it's a good idea. So obviously one problem on the cruise ship is the fact of how much food is just wasted on the cruise. And there's very little you can do about that, because the food needs to be turned over and the cruise. But what they did in Italy, because those cruises are usually they usually stop at another port every day. So they found ways to unload some of that food, not just food that wasn't used, and now they've ordered new food to come on. Because that's part of the issue also with cruises, is that they could have 1,000 chickens left over, but they've already ordered 1,000 frozen chickens, but they've already ordered another 1,000 to come on. They need to get rid of them. Their refrigerators can't handle it. So in general, it's not something we've looked at up till now, because cruise industry in Israel was tiny. However, and I appreciate you bringing it up, because maybe I should be looking into it. In fact, I'm not checking my emails. I'm making myself a note now. And the note is Carnival. And why do I say Carnival? Because Carnival Cruise Lines announced about 2 months ago that August, September, October, Haifa is becoming a hub, and 27 cruises are going to be leaving, which is amazing for Israel's tourist industry. It was supposed to happen last year, but then between COVID and war, they pulled out. But they're back. Maybe it helps that their owner is Jewish and owns the Miami Heat. So maybe that helps. But you know what? I appreciate the comment, because we're gonna look into it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Megan. I'm a teen going on the Israel trip, and I'm curious what exactly we're going to be doing with your organization once we get to Israel.
Megan, you don't want a surprise?
What?
You don't like surprises?
No.
No, okay, fine, okay. So look, I'm assuming because you guys are coming in the summer, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm assuming that you're gonna, because we have two projects that we do with volunteers. One project is we have about 25,000 volunteers a year who help work in the fields, actually picking fruits and vegetables. Although you guys are from Houston, you can handle the heat, but because you're coming in the middle of the summer, the likelihood, and Shira can correct me if I'm wrong, the likelihood is you'll be working in our warehouse, sorting and packing fruits and vegetables which have come in. What fruit or vegetable, I cannot tell you because we're a rescue organization. We almost never know what we're going to be getting our hands on. You'll be sorting them into different grades. And the reason for that is we like to send the best stuff that Leket gets to organizations where it's going to make it to families, to give them respect and honor so that the nicest fruits and vegetables come to their homes. And then stuff that's, let's say, grade B, we'll send to soup kitchens where they're going to be cooking it anyway. So it doesn't really matter what it looks like. So you guys will be working, you'll be sorting, you'll be bending, make sure you do your squats before you come and practice touching your toes because that's the kind of stuff you're going to be doing. You're going to be lifting, okay? Because basically you guys work from these crates which hold about 1,000 pounds of potatoes or carrots, and you're going to be digging in there, taking them out, sorting them, putting them into smaller crates or boxes, and then stacking them. It's fun. There's music. You'll be sweating, but you'll have a good time, I promise.
Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Have a safe trip to Israel.
Hi
Hello.
there. My name is Kendall. I'm one of the teachers here. My question for you is, why did your organization start to implement the financial, incentives? And now that you've started doing that for certain farmers, do you think it's going to be something that you have to continue doing? Or like, is that something that you plan to continue doing? Do you see it's going to be a problem if you stop doing that?
You should work for Leket. Because every single thing you said, I'm going to say in a way, you answered your own question. Okay, so the answer is as follows. No, Leket never gives money to farmers, okay? This situation, this Russia situation it happens so fast and it's causing such pain for some farmers, not all farmers. We're looking very carefully on a case-by-case basis because you can have farmers who are massive and now maybe they've lost 2, 3, 4% of their business. They'll survive. So the money that we're raising that we're going to give to farmers is really focused on smaller farmers where we think or we know or understand from talking to them that they're looking at a total loss, perhaps even going out of business. Because if your whole business was export to Russia, and I read about one guy who said he usually brings in about 2 million shekels, that's let's say about $600,000 a year, done. He has nothing to sell. So in his case, that's the kind of person we're looking for. We're going to give them 8 cents for every pound that they give us, but we're not calling it a payment. We're calling it we're covering their operational costs. It's more like we're paying for your forklift, we're paying for your workers, and they know very well, we've made it very clear to them, this is a special situation, which we hope for their sake doesn't rear its ugly head again. I promise you, whatever Leket's giving them, I think really we believe strongly it's only going to create tremendous goodwill that we were there for them at a time of difficulty. And so when the future happens and the typical happens, which is 1% or 2% or 3% of their crops that they can't sell, we're not gonna have to call them, they're gonna call us because they're gonna understand the good work that we do. We actually think these payments are gonna make the organization even stronger, and we're not concerned that people are gonna expect it in the future. Thank you. Who else has got a question for me?
Those are all the questions here in the room.
Joseph,
Okay.
I have a question.
Sure.
So I'm the point of contact with Second Servings from our synagogue here in Houston, and a lot of our transactions usually deal with bar and bat mitzvahs. Certainly, Shabbat in Israel is much different than what we're dealing with at a Reform synagogue. Do you have challenges, either A, collecting food, or B, distributing food that are specific to dealing with, some of the restrictions with Shabbat in Israel?
So, okay, interesting. I haven't thought about that a lot. In general, we do not pick up a lot of Shabbat food because we're just concerned Shabbat and holiday food, because in the kosher world, they're not cooking on Shabbat, so it's been cooked on Friday. It may have been served, some of it Friday night, some of it may have been served the same food Saturday. So that we don't do, unfortunately, it just means that a lot of Shabbat food really, really does go to waste. I guess the good thing is that synagogues in Israel are generally much smaller. You don't have, I don't think when I was in Houston, is your temple like just massive? It never ends?
We are about 1,600 members, and there's two others that have at least 1,500 members.
What are the other ones called?
Beth Yeshurun, which is the largest conservative shul in the country, is about 2,200, and Beth Israel, which is another large reform, is 1,400.
Okay. I think I'm pretty sure I was in your synagogue because Rabbi Glickman, who's on our board, who used to be in Houston, he's a Reform rabbi, and he made all the arrangements for me when I came. And I came and I said, I've never seen, I grew up in New York in big Orthodox synagogues. Yeah, nothing like that. Okay, Israel, the synagogues are like my synagogue in Ra'anana, outside of like the great synagogue in Jerusalem, maybe the biggest or one of the biggest synagogues in the country. But our social hall, you can maybe seat 200 people in there. And most synagogues in Israel don't even have social halls. So all those kind of kiddushes and things like that we grew up with in America, it's just not the same. That being said, you also have all the hotels that are, preparing food for Shabbat, the army. So everything so Leket really, unfortunately, we do miss a lot of food, but that's primarily for health and safety reasons from Shabbat. Oh, okay, there we go. So I guess I was right with Rabbi Glickman, right? Okay. Anything else for me? I know it's called a lunch and learn, but here it's a dinner and learn. Do the teens get lunch at least?
They do. They're eating pizza.
Okay. Okay, pizza, fine. Okay, fine. Just want to make sure. I want to take care of them, So it's called lunch and learn, so you never know. Maybe they don't know it's called lunch and learn. So I guess if it was New York, it would be bagels. So, right. Okay. Listen, I'll just make a few closing comments. So first of all, very excited to see the teens. I want to add, and maybe Shira will pop it into the chat and send it by email as well. We have, during the intermediate days of Passover, we have a few open picking days where we get 500, 600, 700 people every day. So if there are any congregants coming to Israel for Passover, or frankly, coming to Israel at any time, we'd love the opportunity to host them. So please, you can be in touch with me or with Shira. If any congregants are coming, please let them know about Leket, and we'll love to put them to work. That's number one. Number two, we're growing like crazy. So certainly, let people know about our work, let people know what we're doing. I wish, someone said to me yesterday, why aren't you doing this? I said, we would do it if our budget was unlimited. But of course, like every organization, including the temple, here's a plug for the temple, budgets are not unlimited. So we make very difficult choices with what to do. But the one thing we never want to do, and it's something we're scared of now, is, keep our trucks on the road. So certainly keep us in mind. Anyone who's thinking about any charity, wants to give any charity to Israel, please consider us. I will say, as much as people in Houston, no doubt, I'm sure you're like every other Americans, are complaining about the price of gas. When you teens come to Israel, get ready to know how to convert from liters to gallons, and you'll see that gas prices in Israel are almost double what they are in America. Okay, so we feel for you when we talk about gas, but we don't feel that much. And that's, of course, impacting Leket's budget, but forget Leket's budget. Where it's really impacting is the poor people that we serve. And they're really struggling to make ends meet. And I think I'll finish just by telling you, Leket exists, and the only reason people support us and help us is, of course, because we take our excess food and we distribute it to the poor, okay? But we should be fighting food waste, even if there was no poor people to give it to, okay? Food waste is a scourge. It's destroying the environment, especially for the teens. I've had a good 47 years so far here. I hope to have a lot more years on this planet, but it's getting worse every single day. And food waste is a real problem, and one that's talked about far more than it was when I started Leket, but I'm not seeing enough change, not in people's behaviors, even with all the great works of the Lekets and all the great work of the Houston Food Bank and others. It's still shocking how much food still slips through. So I really beseech of all of you, especially the teens, keep it in mind, think about waste. Don't tell your parents I don't eat leftovers. Loki, there's the dog. There you go. Okay. By the way, he doesn't ever bark. He's a golden doodle. Okay. He only barks when someone rings the bell. He's like, there was a dog fight in the dog park this morning. He was just sitting there watching. That's the kind of dog I have. So, could someone get the door? Anyway, I just keep an eye on the food waste, fight it, find ways to change society. Really, if there's one message I can leave for the teens, most importantly, it's I'm very proud of what Leket's built. We're gonna rescue and redistribute this year probably 65, 70 million pounds of fruits and vegetables, a tremendous accomplishment, but it's not enough. So you have your work cut out for you. And of course, when you come to Leket, you'll be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And we look forward to greeting you. Let me wish everyone a happy Passover, a safe, enjoy the time with the family, enjoy your Seder, enjoy synagogue if you come. I'm not going to, for those who don't, enjoy Pesach anyway. And maybe some will say I'll enjoy Pesach more without coming to the synagogue, but we won't. I'm just going to get myself in trouble here. And especially with those who work for the synagogue. But really, it's been a pleasure to be on with you. And I look forward, if I'm in Israel, I will certainly come and say hello. We'll see how many of you remember our name, my name. And I just thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity to meet you all. Oh, I hear the claps. Thank you. Maybe that's just Shira clapping. She always claps for me.
No, that was, I was a little slow on the unmute, but there was a lot of applause here in the room for you. Thank you so much for being here with us today. We know it's late for you there. We so appreciate learning more about this really important work that you and Leket are doing. And we look forward to, as you said, being part of the solution when we visit over the summer.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the time, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your lunch. And again, happy Passover to all.
Thank you.
Thank you.